I would just like to welcome everybody here today. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Eléonore Biezunski, who has just been doing phenomenal work as an archivist, as a poet, as a musician, and as a creative thinker in just many, many dimensions. It's been my privilege to work with her as a musician and to perform with her in New York City. And it's been my also a distinct pleasure to work with Eléonore on the Klezmer Archive project over these last 2 years. And I'm looking forward to continuing that work as we go forward with that project. But the focus of today's conversation is really about archives, archival spaces, and in particular, Eleanor's recent work and thesis work for her PhD that she recently defended on the topic of the Yivo Sound Archive, the Max and Frida Weinstein. I'm going to say it wrong. How do you say it, Eléonore?
The Max and Frida Weinstein archive of Yivo sound recording. I don't blame you. It took me years to get this right.
So without further ado, I mean, we have Eleanor's biography on our website, and we will be posting it in other spaces. But I think we should dive right in. Shall I pin us, Clara? I'm going to pin me, and I'm going to pin Eléonore. And okay, so that we can talk together. But I think that as with many of our in focus presentations, we do oftentimes like to have questions come in and answer them as they come up. So if you have a question or a thought or comment or something that you would like to add to our discussion, please put it. I just unpinned it. Clara, do you do what you need to do to make it work? I can see only myself, and Eléonore, but it's good. What do I wanted to say? Oh, if you have a question, put it in the chat, or put your hand up using the little Zoom widget so that we can see that you're there. Clara's going to monitor the chat, and she will let me know, jump in if there's something that we should be addressing now. But so to get us started, Eléonore, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be writing this thesis? First of all, give us the title of your thesis, if you would be so kind, in English, rendition of the thesis. And then I'd like to just hear you kind of talk about how you got here. That's it.
Yes, sure. So I don't remember exactly the title, but it's something like the archive as a living space, Klezmer revival in the Yivo Sound Archive.
Fantastic.
Something along those lines. In French, there is a pun on the creuser le sillon, because the grooves, I think the pun would work in English too, actually. The grooves of the soil of the earth, and the grooves of the disc, of course. So it's like creuser le sillon of klezmer music in the archives. So so my background, okay, where to start, or I take it backward. I okay, I studied music. I studied violin, classical violin, and then got into klezmer music. As I already had started learning Yiddish language for a few years before, when I was a teenager. I then studied geography and found out that I could study klezmer music in New York as a geography fieldwork master research project. So I did that, and I also studied the representations of New York in the Yiddish songs. So it was like a two-faceted, it was actually two theses, because that's the French system then.
And they demanded of you not one thesis, but two for your master's? That's a lot.
Well, it was a transition between two systems, and yeah, I had like a master one and a master two, and both had like a pretty,
Thesis attached to them.
yeah. So which were like 120 pages each. It was like and the master two was a already kind of preparing. It was a research. I was taking the research path, so it was already sort of preparing for a research project for a PhD.
Hmm.
And so I well, then I looked for someone in geography who knew something about Yiddish, and I couldn't find any. And I was accepted into a history program.
Hmm.
And so anyway, that then there's a long story of curvy curvy path, and and then I moved to New York, and after doing field work on Yiddish theater and Yiddish songwriters and contemporary songwriters and different things related to Yiddish culture, I moved here, and just at the time where there was an opening for assistant position in the Sound Archive, and so I started there in 2016, and after a year there, I thought, okay, I'm not gonna write this thesis, so I dropped out. And after a year in the Sound Archive, I actually was like, oh my God, this is it. This is
Here's
it.
my topic.
This needs to be written about. There is not enough about it. I'm like, I have to like scratch archivists' brains, not just their heads, their brains, to figure out what's there, and uh, understand what I have in front of me. And I was like, this is not quite right. There should be, more understanding of what's there that's available, more material available. I mean, there was already a lot, but um,
I, I want to backtrack for just 1 minute. And when you're talking about these two theses, and one of them you mentioned that you were investigating New York as a geographical place as represented inside of Yiddish songs. Do I have that right?
right, that was the
And
second part.
and then the first one was about sort of mapping the geography of klezmer music physically located in the city of New York. And
Right.
was there a time period on that roughly that you were examining?
So I was doing field work, which means I was going places where Klezmer was happening them. So it is a
Ah,
snapshot, but then like from that I could draw like it was a comparative urban program,
mhm.
and yeah, from then I could like and the name of the project was um the dynamics of immigrant music. So I was sort of like tracing some historical dynamics for like why something ended up there, and why this neighborhood, and so and then I also like sort of did some work on the context, and yeah, and the historical background of Jews in New York, and at different scales, like coming from Europe to the United States, and then migrations within New York from like the Lower East Side to other parts of Manhattan or Brooklyn, and how this impacted the places when people were playing at the time when I did the field work. I think
Mm.
some of it is still accurate, some of it has changed because some places have closed and all that, but it was um yeah, a snapshot that was enabling me to understand a deep, like some deeper connections between places and people. And
Yeah, 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 yeah. And when you said something really tantalizing just a minute ago, which is that as you're starting to work at YIVO in that sound archive there, you're realizing, if I'm kind of projecting onto you a little bit, you're realizing that it's really more than simply looking at objects. But in order to understand the objects, you need to like connect with and touch into the knowledge of the people who were there, and maybe the people who were there before you were there and who are not there anymore. Is that kind of what got you started on that trail?
yes, I mean, you know, an archive is and this particular archive is very big, so it's a collection, and in this case, a big collection of objects that are more or less arranged in space, in boxes, in folders, and and you have more or less written descriptions of those and catalogs and all that. So that sort of like mapping, that's partly, yeah, available, and that's partly mental maps for people who know where things are, and so that I kind of wanted to just get more knowledge of the collection. I mean, that was my work, but it was for me, it was an opportunity to, yeah, to actually finish the thing I started and dropped out from. But I was like, and also not do it necessarily as an academic, but do it as an archivist, and that made sense for me more. So it was a way to also deepen my knowledge that was practical for me in my work.
I mean, I've just learned a ton over the past 3 years, thinking about the Klezmer Archive project, and then now reading your sort of some of the things that you wrote for your defense that you so graciously shared with me. But this idea, I feel like I've always just thought of an archive as a building, like that the archive is a building, and inside of the building there are things, and that is the focus and purpose of the archive, right? And that there are, and there are objects. There's a building, there are objects, and there are catalogs that describe the things that are in the building. And in my sort of very simplistic understanding of that, the human connection is really so undervalued, because of course you think, oh, there are archivists, and of course there's a help desk or a thing, but I just didn't really understand, even though it had been sort of hammered at me for many, many years now. It took me a really long time to grok this thing that you kind of have really highlighted, which is the archive as revival, that the human actions of people, specific people in a specific time, in a specific place, have sort of created what we now consider to be a collection of objects. But that revival and revitalization was instrumental. It didn't just happen. It had to be created. It had to emerge from an act of like kind of radical intent somehow. So I wanted to hear you kind of reflect on that, and talk about what you did, how you discovered that, and how you came to these findings.
Mhm. Wow, yeah, there's a lot in what
It's a
you
lot.
just
I'm
said.
sorry.
No, it's okay. This is great. But so I think that as a geographer, but I think like maybe some sociologists or ethnographers also think it would be that way. Um, but as a geographer, in terms of thinking of space, because it is, an archive is a building and it is a collection of objects. That is not untrue.
Right.
So in terms of thinking of space, and when I use the word territory in French, territoire, it's a bit, yeah, it has this idea, when it's used by geographers, that it's a dynamic relationship between the space and the people. That space impact us, but that will also transform the space constantly, and that is a dynamic relationship. So the archives, that's kind of how I looked at the archives, and but also just simply by trying to understand more the history of the place, I had access to all the administrative files from the sound archives, and all the like desk files from my predecessors in the archives, um, um, and what I realized is that when it was created in 1981, it was really the result of a few years of yeah of an intent to revitalize the music. And so when in 1978 there was this Dave Terrace concert. So Dave Terrace was rediscovered basically by a small community of passionate people, and who found someone who could teach them. So that's again a human connection, right? Historical recordings were very important, but there were also these people, carriers of the culture, these bearers, cultural bearers, who were still alive and who could transmit this knowledge. So there was this very important concert at Casa Galicia in the East Village, and not exactly in the East Village, but a little bit more west. But anyway, not very far from Nivo, and now, which then was not there. Sorry.
The geographer never sleeps. The geographer in you never sleeps. I can hear that. You know, it has your mental map is right here in the front. But yes, that's great.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, there was this very important moment where people were like, "Oh my God, this exists. This is alive. I want to do this. It's, this is mine," or whatever, like people got very excited, and so there was a need to access their old recordings as well, to be able to reconstruct and revive the music. And that's how Henry Saposnik started to come to Evo. And there were the records at Evo. There was a sound archive before the establishment of the sound archive. It was just scattered around the building, which was this old Vanderbilt mansion on Fifth Avenue and 86th Street, which now is the Neue Gallery. That's where Evo was located at the time. And so yeah, there were stuff, but no one was really paying attention to the sound recordings. It was like the paper archives were what people really cared for more.
I mean, it's wonderful that those things were there. I mean that is if you think about a repository, somebody has some things and they're like, well, I don't know who to give these to. The family doesn't want them or whatever, but they need to go somewhere. Where should I take them? And there is a place, if you're a Jewish person, where you can say, oh, Yivo, yeah, I'll take them to Yivo. Maybe they will take them from me. And thankfully Yivo said, okay, sure, we'll take those things that have to do with sound recordings and so like this, and they put them on a shelf in a place, in a corner, in a room,
in a closet in the basement.
Right, of course.
Or no, that's kind of what it was.
Right. Okay. Well, representing how the perceived value, but at least okay. So not the most robust storage conditions that we might imagine, but at least they were saved.
Basement or attic or wherever.
Yeah. Where all good accordions are stored in the attic or in the basement, like the two bedrooms accordions.
You're right.
But I mean, it's so, my impression is that, when I imagine how this concert landed, and maybe there are people in this room who can describe this because they were there, but, it was like this big event and people maybe started looking around them and saying, oh, where's the other stuff? If I can't work with Dave Terrace myself, right? How do I get access to things that are like Dave Terrace, is that
right? Yes, but I mean, I don't know. I'm not in the Mayans exactly, but even if they could have access to studying with Dave Terrace, it's like learning a language from just one person,
right?
So having access to old recordings was, it was repertoire, it was style, it was instrument, it was all the things that you can find in there, however scratchy they are. So
Well, and nobody wanted those 78s. I mean, I remember being able to go to yard sales and finding 78s for like people were just like, just I will pay you to take them away from my house,
Right.
practically, you know. So I'm so envious of the collectors from that time period who were able to collect just wonderful, wonderful things. And many of them ended up at Evo, right?
Right. Sure. I mean, and there was a big effort to collect. So like, yeah, well, the fact that the 78 collection at Evo is so important is, partly because of that. And that's like what I mean by this dynamic relationship. It didn't like it's not neutral what ends up being there. I mean, some of it is random. Some of it, I mean, there is a part of chains that happened in what ends up being in an archive, but there's also, yeah, these intentions, these specific interests that have to do with the context of the time,
Hmm.
and maybe some sort of ideology, or maybe not ideology, but ideas of what an archive should be or could
Hmm.
be.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
all these things that transform the way that, yeah, objects are collected, objects are described, and etc. And so then that affects how accessible they are,
Right.
and how accessible they are made.
Right.
'Cause-
Well, it strikes me also as a deep moment of collective action and generosity in a lot of ways. You know, people could have and people did surely go out and collect records privately,
and
right?
some
That were
people
not
even,
accessible.
yeah, um big collector in on the West Coast, Schwartz. I
Yeah,
have
yeah, 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 yeah. I know who you,
I don't know
Dr. Schwartz.
his first name, but
Martin, Dr. Martin Schwartz.
Martin Schwartz. Yes, sorry, thank you.
That's
And
okay.
he was very instrumental too in the dissemination of certain recordings, and the work of Henk Snetsky at the Klezmer Conservatory Band, and people were also like looking into their own families' attics, and whether Henry or Hank's, they had like musicians in their lineage, and they were looking at this too. So it's a it's a whole, but the yeah, those archives were extremely important, and there was like a lot of life around so it was located on the fifth floor of this mansion, and it was called uh, the autonomous fifth floor. It was like not super accessible, I think, and but there was this like, constant traffic going up and down, like, and younger people, and people even were like, what's going on there? And it was this youth, and this like, and people were, and it was a tiny tiny room, and people were coming in and listening to stuff and discussing stuff, and
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I mean, you said something very important, which is that we can't get inside of the heads of the people who attended the 78 concert and these other things. But I know you prepared some photographs so that we might be able to read on faces some of these emotions. But also, it strikes me like as completely hilarious that thank goodness there was a space on the fifth floor of the mansion. But like, if you're schlepping boxes of 78s, like going on a 5-story walk up with your box or your crate of 78 gramophone records, like that is like a heroic endeavor, you know?
yeah, yeah. And at the beginning, Henry was schlepping his record player every day,
Oh my goodness.
because they wouldn't let a space for him to leave it there, but after a while he was able to leave it there.
That's amazing.
But
That's amazing.
before
That's
the
amazing.
so and a lot of things happened that made it possible for the archives to exist. I mean, there was at the time, Sam Norwich was the executive director at Evo, Adrian Cooper was assistant director, Barbara Kirschenblatt Gimblet was around, and there was this like understanding that this was important. And so there was a small group of activists, of musicians, and there was also academics, and there was also institutional grounds, and all of these factors made it possible for it to be created with like an opportunity. There was just an opportunity. Someone, a donor, the Weinstein family, came in with so Josh Waletsky had just made this movie, Images Before My Eyes. And so
Mhm.
the Weinstein family was ready to give some money to make another film like that or something. And Sam Norwich said like, there's not enough money for a film, but you could fund the establishment of the Sound Archive instead. And so basically between like all of these great minds, it happened. But it was, it was an opportunity. It was the right time. It was a sort of a need at the moment. But yeah,
That's marvelous. Once again, this is something that hadn't occurred to me because, of course, when you're a young person or a new person, even if you're an old person, but you're a new person, it's very easy to think that, oh, I'm inventing something. Doing something new for the first time. Um, and what I'm speaking about is this idea that practitioners, and we've always known this in klezmer music, that klezmer music, some of the greatest advocates for klezmer music and Ashkenazic expressive culture have been musical practitioners. And this goes back to, the early part of the 20th century, but particularly in this period of revival, we see this, what you're describing as a partnership between the sort of activist musicians who are really enthusiastic and just working really hard, uh, connecting with academia and making connections there, and then finding institutional support to put together a durable legacy. And,
yeah, absolutely.
and you need all three of those things.
Right, and historically, all of the archivists who have worked in the Sound Archive at YIVO have been practitioners, performers,
Yeah.
and have had sort of their own also creative, um, you know, uh, path related to what they would find there, and also I think that whether we want it or not, we're gonna cater a little more this way or that way because of our own interests. But I mean, more or less.
Yeah, we're human beings, and so it's like my ex-husband John Demetric like volunteered at the Folk Life Center at the Library of Congress, and talk about a giant building filled with just more stuff than anybody could deal with, and they have these interns, and they just say, well, what do you want to do? And intern says, well, this is going to be my project. They pick something that they're interested in, and then they do a finding aid or they do a project.
Exactly.
It's and that's the beauty. There's the beauty and the joy of working in an archive is that you get to follow your nose, and you're always more invested when you're following and doing something that is actually connected with your own sort of following your own nose through the material. So
Sure. I mean, but yeah, it's very interesting at how also like each of the people who've worked there have, acquired the skills that were necessary at the time, and those skills like change a little bit over time because the technology changes and all that, but acquired the skills to describe properly, to everything, and like really, um, yeah. And I mean, I just also want to acknowledge like I'm so admirative, like for example, of my colleague Lawrence Klumberg, who works with me in the archive, like his connections, his own personal knowledge, and the connections he's able to make between someone's question and whatever is there in the collection is like blows my mind every time. And there are certain things that he's able to do that I can't do because I don't have all of the same connections that he has. Um, yeah, that's his whole
through the mental
personal.
territory of that collection, is that like, you know, is that how you would describe it? Maybe that he just
Well,
has such a deep knowledge of what's there.
it's beyond the collection. It's
Yeah.
it's his own personal and professional musical culture.
Right.
It's so broad.
Right.
It's so broad, and and the language
Hmm.
and the technical aspect of it. understanding how things are made, you know, in terms of sound, and what technologies are used, and all of that, all of that.
All of it.
He's got like such incredible insight. I mean, I'm learning every day from him.
That's
So,
fantastic.
um,
We have a quick question from Eric Rangel. He asked how much of the provenance of those records was captured at the time. I mean, and
uh-huh. Yeah, so that's been sometimes a bit of an issue, to be honest. Um, but it depends. So the thing about the commercial recordings is that if you sort of like treat them a little bit more like a library collection, because it's like published material,
right.
then the the
Who
need for like the need for like keeping track of the provenance is a little bit less
right.
acute when it's really like a collection of, like, of course, of someone or something, like person, like papers of a person
Mhm.
that include recordings or mostly recordings or whatever, that is like, yes, kept um well, but basically the commercial recordings kind of integrate the commercial recording collections. And yeah, I mean, I kind of wish sometimes that we've been able to keep even just a note, but of like who donated what, but it gets a little crazy. And
It's
then
a lot. Yeah.
yeah, so
Well,
we
and
treat the
also,
commercial collection more like as a library collection, and the rest more as archival. And of course the provenance now is very important. I think that's been pretty well kept track of.
yeah. Well, I think I remember you describing to me that with some of the 78s, you have many multiple copies,
Hmm.
and so that there's, do you need 10 copies of Eufen Privichik by, Isaac Kramer recorded on, like that are the
We
same
keep
multiples?
three. we
You keep
keep
three.
we keep the best copies we have, and if we have only two, then we'll welcome
Up
a
to.
third one.
Right.
And if and but I'm so what I'm trying to keep track of is like in what condition the discs
Right.
are, because if we
Right.
have three pristine discs and we receive a fourth one, I can just see on the catalog, okay, I don't even need to go
You don't
back to
even
the
look
stacks
at
and
it.
check, this is going to be in
Fine.
giveaway box, and
Right, 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 right.
we're either going to send it to another archive or invite a collector to come look at what we have or something.
Great. Do you want to go ahead and start sharing your slides? There's
Oh,
like such
sure,
amazing photographs in here, and I think that
sure,
people will really appreciate seeing them. And they will invite questions as we go through them because
sure.
there's pretty cool stuff here. And these are these were shared with you by the people that you interviewed for your thesis.
It varies. I Some of them I just found in archival stuff, and yeah. So well, this first one is very dear to me because that was on my first day working at
Wow.
Evo, and the photo archivist Vital Zaika just took it on the spot while Lauren was just showing me around. So I was like carrying this pile of 78 recordings, and I was visiting, and I was so psyched. And anyway,
That's terrific.
so
That's terrific.
that's a dear moment.
And literally hands-on on the first day. You've got 78s in your hands. You are ready
Wait.
to like rock and roll.
So this is the poster of that one of this series of concerts that happened in 1978 with Dave Terrace at Casa Galicia, which was so important, featuring the Dave Terrace trio, Zef Fellman and Andy Statman, who of course were important. These are like three of the like very important albums of the time that came out around this time.
Mhm.
Capelier, Andy Statman, Zef Fellman, and the Klezmer Conservatory Band, and all of these bands were really like part of that rediscovery of the 78s and reappropriation of the music. They were doing their own interpretation of it. So that's the Yedias von Yivo, the newsletter of Yivo, announcing the sound archive, the creation of the sound archive in 1982. So it's been just 40 years. And we had a little round table with all the our historical sound archivists from Yivo at Yivo for this to celebrate the 40 years. So you can find that on the Yivo YouTube channel.
And I will post it. I will post it also in a place where we can find it. Probably I will post it on the Archive and Focus page under Eleanor's bibliography, just so that it stays as sort of a durable reference there. And we will also link to it in the playlist for the Archive and Focus series once we get the recordings published, because I think that's an important it's an important moment. It's an important document that.
Right. It was a really interesting conversation. Yeah. So this was the building on 86th Street and Fifth Avenue. And that was a few years later in 1987. But there was also a concert when the Sound Archive was created, and we can at the corner of that building. So we can imagine like the launch of the Sound Archive being a little bit like that.
Okay, so we'll go back to the building. Where's the fifth floor? I only count 4.
Yeah, you're right. So I'm not sure, but
it must have been like way up in the attic somewhere. You know? Like amazing.
It was the maid's quarters or whatever. You know,
incredible.
It was really hidden up there. So that so that was Capellier playing in at the Museum Mile Festival. Photo by Lyle Silbert. And that was in the Yivo. All of these pictures I found in the Yivo annual report of 1988 and 1987. So here is this little tiny room in 1987 with Henry Sapoznik looking over Jenny Romain, who was a sound archivist there for 12 years, and Lawrence Klumberg, who was not yet a sound archivist there, but who was working at Yivo as a graphic designer and typist. So he was hanging out there a lot, and then became a sound archivist later on. So yeah, a lot to unpack in this picture. Like you can see the old cataloging system on the screen.
I mean, you know, there's a form there, and like that's awesome.
I mean, that's the FileMaker Pro file that we've been using, I'm still using as a reference today. I mean, I'm as we say, remediating all this data into the new platform little by little. It's been done, but I'm cleaning it and rearranging it better. But I'm still using this FileMaker Pro file. It's like
FileMaker Pro is a great. I'm a fan. I used it myself, like not too much, you know, in a later iteration. So like, you know, whatever it is, however it is that you can store your data, you know, in an organized way. You know, I mean, it's a step up from card catalogs, right?
The way you can search in there is just so easy.
I know.
I like it too, but we're moving away from it, but it's still kind of cool to use it. That was
totally.
That was a little like threefold flyer for the Sound Archive around this time. I guess soon after they got the another little chunk of funding from the Weinstein family, maybe they were able to do that. And so yeah, something extremely important that happened. Of course, here in the center is Adrienne Cooper, who I maybe doesn't need an introduction, but in case you don't know, you're not aware who she was, Adrienne Cooper, she passed away in 2011, but she was an incredible singer, incredible educator, an activist, and she worked at Yivo as a assistant director for when the sound archive were created. And something very important that happened just after the sound archive was created from YIVO was the creation of the Yiddish folk arts program that you may have heard about as Klezcamp. So Klezcamp was first created within YIVO as a way to reach out to people who would not necessarily come to the archive. So here again, like the circulation between the artifacts, the knowledge, the music, the teaching, the mentor, the friendship, it's all like a big
So connected.
like the community, you know, that was created around this archive, and the role that this archive served within this community is just like very important. So here you see
Well, this
and she was also like known for teaching songs with like and giving a lot of context, which is like very important when we talk about archive. Like a piece of correspondence is worth nothing if you don't understand who was writing to whom and when and what was going, you know, what they're talking about. So that's like any archive is like that, and or any, and the songs also themselves carry all these things like so Adrian was amazing at like sort of transmitting all these like meanings that were linked to the context of the songs. And in the background at the piano you see Lauren also.
is fantastic. I mean, this really just highlights kind of this progression that we get by naming the space, by taking these disparate musical items and objects that had been preserved and then collecting them all together in one space and naming that space, giving it a name that's actually quite profoundly important, I think. You know, the Max and Frida Weinstein sound recordings of the collection of YIVO, like then it's like all of a sudden it's got a name. You can put it on a business card, you can put it on a brochure or a pamphlet, and then people know that that is a place, even if the place is a teeny tiny room on the fifth floor of a building, you know, on Fifth Avenue that like is tucked away. It doesn't, it matters, of course it matters, but also it doesn't sort of matter because now there's a place. And once there's a place, now you can have attached to that place another place, which is the Yiddish Folk Arts program, right? That now is connected. And that is a location that also exists in the mind, but now it exists in that room of the photograph, right?
Absolutely.
You know?
So
Yeah.
so here is another picture from that time that was made that was given to me by Sarah Gordon, so Adrian Cooper's daughter, from Adrian's personal papers. The photo was taken by Clemens Kalischer in December 1987, and this is at Klezcamp.
An historic photo, if there ever was one. You know?
Yes, yeah, Libby
Do you know what year?
That's what 1987. Yeah. So yeah, it's historical. I mean, I don't want to right now identify each person on it on the photo, but it's really pretty amazing to see, and it's very nice to see them in 1987. Yeah, it's Jeff Shower. Okay, let me do it quick. Alan Byrne from the top left. Alan Byrne, Jeffrey Chandler, Jeff Shower. Hold on.
Kurt?
Ken Maltz.
Ken Maltz, yep.
And then in the back still, Dan Peck, Dave Harris, I mean like really back, and Jim Gutman. And then Cyril Valetsky next to Jeff Shower, Paula Tettelbaum, Jenny Romain, Felix Fibish, the dancer, Irene Stahl, and Mimi Rapson. And so Lawrence Klamberg is sitting on his knees on the left next to Henry Sapoznik, and then Henk Snetsky, Adrian Cooper, Peggy Davis, Joshua Letsky, and in the front, uh, Michael Alpert, sassy as always. Uh, so yeah, that's it.
Right, Kurt. We missed Kurt. Kurt is in the back there at the fourth from the very left of the photo. Is that right, Kurt Bjorling?
Uh,
I think that Marcia Gilden has written in the chat that.
yeah, I'm not certain.
I think that is. I recommend.
Okay, okay, maybe that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Should I
Was
just
that the first Klez camp?
um
No, Marcia Gilden says no. It was not the
no,
first.
because the first class camp was I think in 1985, if I remember correctly. So that must have been the third one. It was still pretty new. Okay, so oops, that's not what I wanted to. Okay, here. Okay, so now I move on to like a little bit more like some of the work I've been very engaged with in the Sound Archive is in particular the collection of Ruth Rubin. So she was a folklore collector, song collector, and her collection, which is a big important collection of sound recordings, and not only is at Evo. So that is her. She grew up in Montreal and then moved to New York when she was around 18. She wanted to be a Yiddish poet, and she actually published one book and her name Rosenfarb. If I don't mistake, I'm so bad with names that even anyway.
Are you allowed to admit that if you're an archivist? I mean, that's just why you write them down.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so Lauren and I are very complementary because he has a like he's a hypermnemonic, and I'm like, I forget everything, so I need to write everything down and create systems to remember things. So
fantastic.
Okay, so that's Ruth Rubin, that's her. So collecting songs on the left bottom, she would like gather groups of people and perform and also have them sing. So that's how she collected things, and then you can see her on the other pictures, sort of working on those recordings, transcribing them, etc. And these are screenshots from the documentary A Life of Song, a portrait of Ruth Rubin that was made in 1986 by Cindy Marshall. And actually the whole film is available on the Ruth Rubin website that I've coordinated. These are more artifacts. Actually, the one on the left may not be from Evo. This may be from another collection. I think this one was provided to me by Elisa Sampson. But this is a program material, and on the right is her notebooks. So there is one box in her collection that are like this tiny binder notebooks that it's my favorite box in the collection. It's like really amazing because you can see her work process, and she would use them when she was performing. She was doing a thing that no one else was really doing at the time, which was performing a cappella.
Amazing
songs. But she would collect in these notebooks quotes from readings, notes from readings, song texts, different things, and then she would reorganize them for her performances by themes, and she would like create like these like stories with like an arc for how she would present the songs and give context and all of that. So that was very, I mean, maybe like maybe Pete Seeger would do, but no one was doing this with Yiddish songs at all at the time when she was doing that.
That totally makes sense. Why she would want to have those little 3-ring binders is because she would rearrange them for different programs. Now I didn't quite make the connection between the little day planner, like those little day planner notebooks, and why you'd want to do that and not use a little more durable sort of like a bound notebook. But that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because
Wanted to type them,
she would
and then they needed to be
reorganize things.
reorganize them. That totally makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, this whole collection is really, and generally speaking, like having like creative people's collection in front of you is really, really a dive into people's creative process, and it's like always so fascinating to see, and like the way that Ruth Rubin in particular was working so methodically, and how she like created the systems for her that would work for her, like these tiny notebooks. It was like her thing. They're so lovely. And so yeah, on the homepage of the website, you can see like a collection of different objects. Like most of the collection is on reel to reels, but at first she started recording on acetate discs, so you can see that, and etc. So why doesn't it move? Okay, so okay, that's a picture of Lauren and I when we launched the website in 2018, and we had this like incredible concert at Evo. It was a big party, and that was the finale with everyone
Amazing.
together. But it was a really great collection of folk singers who came, and Cindy Marshall was there too. And for that event, I prepared a small exhibit that people could see in the Great Hall of Evo. It only lasted for a few hours. It was a really a pop-up exhibit, but I wanted to show this.
This really we talked about this a little bit before we went live here today, but I think this is this really just highlights for me the attention in the work that we're doing today, which is that we work in these digital spaces, and the object we we are in our the Kisselhoff project. We are in an active process, right? We have intentionally created the space where we are digitally notating and renotating handwritten manuscripts. And there's all kinds of reasons for that, right? We've justified this for reasons, but and when we work to keep the handmade nature of the original manuscripts, right? But when we're working in these digital spaces, never mind archival spaces, but when we work and live our lives online, we lose this handmade, hands touched, the fingerprints on the objects quality. And I'm always like grateful to see collections like this. And I kind of hunger for the ability to work in those ways, even as I know that they are cumbersome and they're not suitable really for what the things that we're doing today. I still long for them. And I think that our process is trying to bring the humans back into these digital spaces. Something I think about a lot. And I don't know if you have reflections on that as well, as having worked so closely with this material.
Sure. I mean, well, yeah, also on a practical level, I really like that I have to like get up and get the things and look at them and be standing and be handling objects and not be sitting constantly just on the computer. That's my own preference, but that there is a little bit of like physical work, sometimes actually physical when we carry boxes, yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, especially things like, yeah, these notebooks, or like if you see this little box on the bottom right, is like this tiny alphabetical box with like song cards, and it's like you like kind of you can live in the person's process, and that's like I'm really into processes. I love that. That's kind of when I discovered that geography was cool, is like when I understood that all these arrows on maps and stuff, and I only was explained that so late that I hated it for a long time. I was like, what are these things on the map? I don't get it. And then when I was like, oh, okay, you can actually, these are actually representations of all of these other things. That's when I so it's like for me that it's kind of yeah, it's really great to see that, and the collection, the way people, when like, okay, part of Ruth Rubin Archives is her library, so her books are still in boxes, They are listed, but they're not in the
Hmm.
library catalog. They're listed as part of our archives. And that's always so fascinating to see what people, what world people create around them with these books. So it's just another example, and so like, yeah, dismantling a library is always like kind of a heartbreaking thing because it is a world of, and so many windows too, but like, yeah. um but like, yeah, speaking of windows and other worlds, is like all these field recordings that Ruth Rubin collected and that are now available on this website, also were the inspirations for different contemporary recordings. So yeah, that's just like, these are all very different. And there's also my album, because like, when that's another thing that was incredible in my path, was that I came to YIVO in 2014 when I was still living in France, and Lauren was giving a repertoire class on Ruth Rubin material. And I attended this class, and I went back to France and was like, I am putting together a band, and we're gonna do this. We're gonna put together a program of Ruth Rubin material. And then I recorded this album, and then I moved here. And just at that time, basically, I started to work at YIVO, and just at that time, the collection was ripe for being put online, and I was involved in that, and it was like kind of fantastic how things happened for me personally also. And then I was
Yeah.
very much, yeah, sorry.
Oh, I wanted to maybe snap out of the photos for a sec because I want to talk
Oh,
about
sure.
I want to sort of linger on this Yerusha concept because you've talked about it as part of this sort of turning point in your own life, and it starts to turn us towards this idea of you know we've talked about the archivist creation in the life and work of the revival era artists and Klezmer, but now you have your own journey of the archive as creation in your own life, sort of inspired by this moment of taking a class. And I wanted you to sort of linger on that. Because I know you have Yiddish culture, obviously you come from a Jewish family, you have Yiddish culture in your own background. And I just wanted to ask you to reflect on kind of what that I don't know what that moment felt like for you in some way. I mean, it inspired you to create a band, so I felt there. But can you tell us a little bit more about that
Mm,
moment, moments?
yeah, well, this question kind of makes me want to go a little bit more backward when I first
Okay, let's do it. Let's go
when
for it.
I first started to study klezmer, because I mean, I, weirdly enough, as a 15-year-old, decided to learn Yiddish. That was already kind of weird. Uh, um, and I mean, I had heard Yiddish in my family because my grandparents were speaking Yiddish. My mother was born in Vilna, so there was nothing past vernacular about it. It was the language they were
Okay,
living in,
vernacular.
and I was just experiencing that as a kid. And I knew my grandparents well. They passed away both when I was well into my 20s, and so I knew them very well. And so it was just the language they were living in. I think that when I started studying Yiddish, I had the feeling that this would be this was mine. I thought that, okay, it was mine, and I needed to learn it because I thought that maybe one day I would need it to express myself. So, or that I would need to do something with it. So, okay. And I was playing violin, classical violin. And at some point, my cousin was like, "Hey, David Krakauer is giving a workshop in Paris. You gotta come." Klezmer workshop. I didn't know Klezmer. I didn't really grow up with Klezmer. I heard a lot of Yiddish songs. My mother sang to me in Yiddish. My grandmother sang, and my grandmother sang and told us, "Oh yeah, my aunt, she knew thousands of songs." So it was like just a thing, singing. And my parents were involved in the creation of the IETC, which was the Yiddish cultural organization that is kind of now became the Maison de la Culture Yiddish, House of Yiddish Culture in Paris. So I kind of grew up in this secular Yiddishist environment, but also with the presence of my grandparents in a more like actually connected to their world, because they were still living in their world of like pre-war Lithuania. I mean, and yeah, so that was, and so when I came for the first time to the Klezmer workshop, I was like shaking. I was like, whoa, I know that. I don't know. I mean, it didn't prevent me from learning the style carefully and all of that, but I mean like, was, oh my God, this is like my language. And I couldn't play because I didn't know the tunes or nothing, but it was just like, it was crazy. So I
That
just,
moment of recognition of saying, "This is my accent."
yeah,
On
right.
on the instrument, this is me
I
speaking Yiddish on
know
my
this
instrument, or
language,
something like this. Like, so cool.
I know these inflections. I know, so it was really great. And again, that doesn't prevent anyone from actually learning carefully the style. I want to stress on that. There's no like,
Okay.
this is not, there is no, for me, and interestingly, like, both, like, I stay away from the concept of identity and soul. That's me.
Mm-hmm.
So at least at this level, then it's, or it's so personal that I'm not even, this is just not part of that conversation. But anyway, you make it whatever you want with it.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, so that was a big realization. And the class with Lauren, so yeah, Marsha, that's where we met. And it was a small class. We were just a few students, and it was so wonderful to just come and sing together. I don't know, these were gems. These were like stuff that we had never heard anywhere else, and that were, each of those songs were absolute gems that were like carrying so much with them. And the beauty of the folk songs, where you have a person saying a story there, or there's a little dialogue, or something, but it brings up all of the world around, all of the time space that they're in, but it's not necessarily remote from us.
Mm-hmm.
And so this connection, is, I just felt like, I had always felt that when I was singing Yiddish, because I was already singing Yiddish, that there were like a lot of other voices singing through me, that I was just a channel or something. And so, for me, that material was amazing for that. It was just like, okay, this is it. I don't have to do nothing with it. I don't have to, just sing it.
Right. It doesn't require additive things. You just do it. Just let it. It doesn't. It just wants to speak.
Right. I mean, we did arrange it. We did arrange it with instruments. I mean, we actually did a lot with it that takes it away from its original context. But that was also fine with me. Like, there's nothing that we can't do.
Well, you have to. I mean, we have to. If Yiddish song, if one corner of Yiddish song, maybe you're going to tell me where I'm going to mess this up, so you're going to correct me, but I'm just going to say it anyway. But if one very important corner of Yiddish song is women singing in the home, right? This is not public performative music. This is music for home. And Ruth Rubin, collected such an extraordinary amount of this, as did Barbara Kirschenbach Gimblett. These are collections of songs that are not theater songs. They are not publicly performed songs. So we can continue if we want to be a purist about this. We can say, well, the only way to perform this music is like solo, a cappella voice,
The
unaccompanied,
kitchen.
in the kitchen, right? So if you want to have a concert, you have to come to my house, and I will cook you dinner, and we'll sing, and we'll have a zingara, and that is important, and that's essential, obviously, right? But if we want to say, well, we live in the 21st century and we want to perform these songs, then of course you have to make arrangements. You have to make accommodations to put that music in front of your audience.
Yeah, I mean, and you can have as part of a program like one or two songs that are sung completely a cappella, and it's
Sure.
wonderful too to
Right.
like have that quality of freedom in the singing. Um and yeah, but I mean, I think that there are many ways to be sort of faithful to the culture and the music. Um and Oh, I always think of this interview that Adrian Cooper did for the Wexler Oral History Project. And she says, like, this is yours. Take it, do whatever you want. And it's a bold thing to take on this, and you know, it's something I think about all the time.
Hmm.
And that I think about it for myself. I think about it for anyone who's coming into this culture. And I think this is a very powerful message. It with that attention to context, with that knowledge that if we step away from it, we should do it with awareness.
Hmm.
But it's fine to step away from it. And those songs are relevant in different ways today than they were. And also, do songs need to be relevant? Probably yes, but and we're drawn towards certain songs for certain reasons that are personal to us, and it's so there's so much that goes into this. Yeah.
Alicia wrote something similar actually in one of her essays in the Slobin book, in the Slobin collection, where she also writes, that the music is ours. It is ours to take. It is ours to transform.
No nostalgia.
Yeah, and that yeah, this does not have to stay preserved in amber. This is not a moment. And when I read that, I mean, I had been a very trad. I was a real trad head, and in my own, because like knowing that who am I? Like I'm not, there's almost nothing that's really traditional about me. But I was like holding the flag for a very very traditional approach, and that sort of like by my time in Budapest and so like this, even though we were doing all kinds of crazy things with the music. But sort of somehow encountering that text from Alicia just sort of was like, you know what, you can just like chill out a little bit, and you can it allowed me to be much more open to the process of transformation, to be more aware of my own editorial choices, that I bring, to whatever it is that I'm doing, and saying like, it's okay, you know, it's part of the process. I mean, I love also. I want to bring up the song that you mentioned. There's a couple of songs I want to ask you about, but one of them is the one that I've performed with you, which is the "We don't steal, we take." I love you. I love your performance of that song, but the song itself, the text of it is really powerful. You know.
Right, and that's what gave the name to my project, Yerushe, because the song says, I inherited the profession by inheritance. I inherited the profession, which in Yiddish is heritage is Yerushe, um, and that profession is that you can't steal, but you can take. So it's a song. It's like a thief song. It's a poverty song. It's a humoristic song, and it basically draws the genealogy tree of the person singing, saying like, yeah, my father would like horses that don't belong to him, and but he would never steal them. No, he would just take them. And my mother would go to markets, and she would never steal, but she would take. And my sister with her long arms, she would never steal, but she would take. And I want to leave this will that for my children in 100 years, they know that they shouldn't steal, but they can take. and Yerushe can be a very like kind of heavy word, like what do you do with this heritage? But this song is like you can not steal, but you can take, and that's like the whole thing with archives and folklore, and it's ours. We narrate it, and then we do what we want with it. We're not stealing anything, we're just taking it. and and also, to in today's world, and since maybe the Renaissance or something, I don't know when the copyright laws started existing. It's a thing. It's a
Definitely
thing.
in the
You can't
Renaissance. Yeah.
steal people's work, but folklore is folklore. So, so for me, that was a little bit of a pirouette about, heritage and
I mean, the metaphors, it's so evocative, like it really is, and it's so lovely to sort of bring that, and that you found that to bring into your space. Let me quickly plug in my computer, which for some reason is not plugged in and is about to collapse. So there we go.
no, we don't want that.
Whoa, whoa. Okay, save. Yeah. I mean, and I love the way you perform it so nice. It's so much fun the way to have you
Oh,
perform
that
it.
was so fun to perform
Uh,
it.
yeah, and Marcia writes in the chat, Yerusha shook so great metamorphosis also, and that's a lot to do with this archival space, um, this radical revolutionary space that you are continuing to revolutionize.
Sure. And I mean, and I showed the page on the website that has all the albums that take from Ruth Rubin collection. But I mean, it's just like one example of one collection that people have drawn from to create new things. But these are all like so different. There are like at least two children's songs album in there, and there's like Daniel Kahn, and there's like Miriam Chayesigo, and there's Lauren. We did a project with this incredible Irish singer, and they like kind of mirrored folk songs from the Yiddish tradition and the Irish tradition, and
Hmm.
it's one of my favorite album ever. And there is Vorspiel, who does like psychedelic,
Rock and roll, like the
rock,
whole everything.
Swedish folk song stuff, and it's just it's endless what you can do with this thing. So
It's terrific. So yeah, absolutely. So we're running up on 3:15, and I wanted to be respectful of everybody's time now that the light goes away so early. And I thought maybe like I have two sort of propositions. One is that maybe we could pause and go into gallery view and take some questions and have some discussion. And then if people want to stay a little bit, I'd love to talk about your song, Sheboygan.
Chemodan, yeah.
Chemodan. I'm bad. I'm
You're
confessing my
good.
Yiddish. And does everybody want to do that? Let's go into gallery view for just a second and take some questions.
I've been in gallery view the whole time.
Oh, look at you. Okay, you're the best. Cool, great. Does anybody have a comment or a question or anything that they'd like to just bring into our discussion for a minute, and then we'll hear about the song, and maybe we'll get to hear it on the YouTube. Anyone? Eric, I saw you commented something. You want to unmute and tell us what you wrote?
Well, I'm just wondering about the techniques for preserving and archiving. Like you have some old records, you have tapes, like I guess there's special handling. Like where do you learn that?
Personally, I've kind of learned on the spot, but there are places that would train you. Like there's a Society of American Archivists, and specifically for sound recording, it's a little more specific, maybe. I mean, I look more into it if you want, and I mean, right, like on the top of my head, it's a little hard to give you a more thorough answer, but there are places where you can learn that, and I learned it a lot from Lauren, who we research online when we need, basically we have like a special machine to clean the records, and we use acid-free sleeves. I mean, acid-free boxes, everything. Um, for the tapes, it's a little different, but also like Lauren showed me how to like, okay, when a reel-to-reel splits, because it happens that the magnetic tape dries up a little bit and it splits. So he showed me how to like
Put it back together.
split it back together, and it's like very like sort of practical skills there. It's kind of all over the place because there are so many different media we use, but yeah, I mean, we work with rather. Yeah.
I guess it's coming to my mind because like I have a friend who passed away and now I have stuff from him, and how do I properly handle it and what do I do with it? Yeah. So,
Yeah, I see. So sheet music books take. So okay, so I am not a specialist at all with preservation of books and sheet music, because that's the paper archives at Evo there's a conservation lab that handles that, and I don't do that. Sometimes we also outsource. Like, I mean, when we have bigger collections for digitization of, especially of reels, for example, like we do have a machine that we can use to digitize certain things. But if we have like a collection of 600 tapes, which
You're gonna send it to him.
we're gonna set it outside because it's gonna be.
I would say, Eric, that like, a lot of it is very practical, and some of it's about money. And the practical side of it is like, if you have cassette tapes, just get them in a temperature controlled space, where the temperature doesn't change. Like, take them out of the attic, take them out of the basement, put them in the main portion of your house where, like, that's just basic step one. And then,
Also, right. But also, like anything that's magnetic, I would recommend to digitize ASAP.
Today. Yeah.
And it can be done, I mean, depending on the number you have, it can be done with, just a sound interface and a tape deck, at home with your computer.
You can now buy, and like, you can buy from, I have one. It's like, you can buy online like a tape deck that goes direct to your computer. So you
Right.
can just use Audacity, use the tape deck, and like, you can be cooking dinner and it'll record one side. Now you have to process the side, but like, you can at least,
But so what's important to know what there is then is like, like there, then the description is important, and you can go more or less deep, or like you can go at a very granular level of description, or less granular. You can just say, here are that many tapes and that many this and that many that, or you can go in and say, okay, the tape one is that tape, and you may want to number the tapes before you digitize them so that you can have appropriate file names for them, so that you can know what what tape goes with what.
totally.
I mean, these are kind of obvious, but
Right.
these are sort of the steps you wanna take to do this.
thank you.
Yeah. And Benjamin, you have your hand up. Do you have a question? Go for it.
I do. So, Eleanor, I'm curious how your research has influenced your fiddle playing. Could you comment on that?
Thank you. That's a great question. Probably a lot, but because actually when I was doing my master's, and I started that in 2005, 2006, I first started to come to New York, and at that time I actually used the Evo Sound Archive as a user of the Sound Archive, and I listened to a lot of these old recordings parallel to going to workshops and things like that. So, I mean, just, I feel it's just like has to do with immersion, and like for me, like any style of music or any type of dance, or is like learning a language, and it has its accents and dialects, and so the more you get immersed, and the more different speakers you hear, and the more ideas you have, and the more it's sort of Yeah, this plus going to jam sessions and live concerts, a lot of live concerts too, and so it's all um, um, yeah. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you.
There's this concept of intonatia that Zev Feldman talks about a lot that I think is sort of key here. It's a little bit independent of technique. Technique is the process of learning how to execute a technical thing on your instrument, like a kreps, right? But the intonatia is where and how do you use it when you're performing a piece of music, and that learning the accent, learning the inflections and stuff. That's what all of this listening and having access to the archival, sources is so key. I mean, I was very fortunate. When I was learning about klezmer music in Budapest, I was given a series of unlabeled cassette tapes that were dubs of like the Martin Schwartz, Yivo 78 collection and Klezmer Pioneers, and it was just, a 60 minute cassette, with the two sides on it from these CDs that had been recently produced. And, I just put them on, I just play them over and over again. I didn't know the names of anything because none of the cassettes had labels of what the tracks were, So, but just by getting the inflection of it, that just informed my own practice, So I'm deeply grateful without even knowing it, I have this abiding gratitude to the creation of this sound archive at Yivo. Because without it, I would not have, had the opportunity for somebody to take those recordings, not steal them, and dub them onto cassette tapes and send them to me, and give them to me in Budapest,
Right. Yeah, I know that Lauren was circulating recordings on tapes, and and other people were too, and that's how you would get access. Now, so much of it is either on YouTube or an Internet Archive or on the FAU. I mean, for certain collections, you need a login to access the recordings, but it's easy to get the login. The Dartmouth Jewish Sound Archive. So oftentimes when people ask us, do you have digitize this disc? And oftentimes I look in one of those and they have it already. So I just,
The Mayrand collection, and here's the permanent link.
Yeah, Mayrand, of course, and Dartmouth FAU. These are the main ones. And Internet Archives has a lot of stuff because George Blatt has digitized so much, and there's a whole 78 project on the Internet Archive, and there's like so much of the historical recordings.
And Dan Karkner's classic klezmer, not to mention on YouTube. Like that is like, if you just want to like put up a YouTube playlist, go to classic klezmer on YouTube, and he's just got excellent taste for cool stuff, and you can just sort of let it go,
Yeah, and then if you're looking for like stuff produced in the Soviet Union, there's like Russian
Russian records, yeah,
Russian records, and I mean, there are like lots of resources now online for having access to these. It's so different to arrive to klezmer now than even when I did, but even probably more when you did.
No, I mean, we're in this we have to adjust to a culture of abundance as opposed to a culture of scarcity when it comes to Yiddish resources in some ways. Now, what we're scarce on is this direct connection, that the sort of direct connection to elders, like, because that's just time at work, right? Mm-hmm. But we are ourselves becoming elders, in our community. So I see you, Suzanne, like, and people, turning to us for advice and resources, and, sort of taking that on. But it's true. It's like organizing stuff, making things organized and accessible. I mean, in the past, if you wanted to look into the sound archives, you had to go to New York, and you had to stay there, and then you had to go to the building and ask somebody to help
Still
you.
have to do that for a lot of stuff.
For a lot of stuff, right? But more and more, you can do so much more and more research, and I think there's a value. I think there's a tremendous value in that. I think that I hope to preserve the value of that. But we've just named Russian Records, Mayrank Collection, FAU, and all of these places where you do have access to resources online that don't require you to travel in space in the same way,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, any other comments or questions before we wind up? And go ahead, Suzanne.
I just wanted to say thank you. That's all.
Terrific.
It's really interesting. And it was great to hear your journey so far. And I can't wait I'll keep an ear out for all the things you.
Thank you so much. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Christina and Clara for putting together this series and for all their tremendous work with the Klezmer Institute. It's pretty mind-blowing, and I've been so happy to be part of the Klezmer Archive project too. Just so much going on there. New ideas and yeah, it's great.
Fantastic. All right. Well, with that, I'd like to say thank you to Eléonore for sharing so much insight with us today. It's very exciting to hear from you. There's a lot of resources. I will make sure that the link to your song is available in your biography at the website, and maybe even follow up with a link to some of the things that we've talked about today. This conversation will go online on YouTube in a few weeks, or after the series is over. But I'm going to be speaking to Ludmila Sholokhova here in 2 weeks' time, the weekend of Thanksgiving on that Sunday. It's going to be a wonderful talk because she just has so much knowledge. I mean, she's worked in these major collections over the years, and I'm really looking forward to talking with her and about her, mostly about her new work at the Dorot collections at the New York Public Library. So that's going to be exciting. And she's very eager to talk about what she's doing there, and that's cool. And we have a roundtable discussion that will be happening in December. And we're inviting Jenny Romaine is going to come and be part of this discussion. So that's going to be a really awesome conversation, because we're going to be talking about just all of the things that we've kind of been churning up in this conversation so far. Ilya with his work with the Latvian ethnomusicology, Yiddish music collection, Eleanor's work, and this idea of the archive as revolution, archive as revival, as a creative act in and of itself, something that's very deeply connected to Jenny Romaine's work, as we all know. So we're looking forward to that soon.
Thank you so much. May I add a little thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I saw that my mom, hi mom, commented that this was a beautiful tribute to my grandparents, and so I mentioned her parents. But I just wanted to say that my sort of connection to archives, libraries also comes from my family. So my mother was a librarian. She's a translator, but was also a librarian. And my father does information technology and network of knowledge things. And so I kind of grew up in these conversations. And my grandmother, my other grandmother on my father's side, also knew very well, Monique, was her self-trained archivist. She did an incredible family history. She taught me how to catalog book when I was 8, and she had this my grandparents had books everywhere in every room of their houses, but they knew what they had. It's kind of amazing.
Still have her handmade catalog of the library.
Well, handmade, but she was also using computers very early.
Yes, of course.
And yeah, so anyway, just to say that I'm very thankful for all these these family heritage that I got.
I think it's important. And yeah, and I would like to call out Michelle, who has been so helpful to us with our Klezmer Archive project. Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
And helping us think. He gave us access to this incredible tool that allowed us to just type in our topics for our, the things that we wanted to sort of capture in our work and relate them very quickly. And it was an amazing to have the access to that amazing, cool tool. So great. Well, with that, I think we're going to sign off. I'm going to turn the recording off anyway.